to.
Don't like you very much.
That's fine. I don't blame you. It's not going to be this
Should I skip the
confrontation. I
chair
promise.
just to make you feel?
Yeah, no, that's fine. We've got a divide on stage as well as across society. Right, look, thanks.
I want to crowd you out.
Yeah, no, thank you everyone for.
We have to move up from pictures, apparently.
For joining our session. There you go. Best laid plans. So,
Scooch.
just to set the scene, the UK is undisputedly a leader in the insurance and across innovation sectors throughout the economy. So it's no surprise that the InsurTech sector has played a massive part, both in the UK but also globally, around fixing some of the challenges that the insurance sector has faced over the years. So if that's all rosy, why are we here talking about transformative trajectories? Well, the reality is the socioeconomic and demographical challenges that are faced by the world population, now it's more than 8 billion people, just cannot be solved and fixed by the traditional insurance providers. Customer expectations and the ability to set aside money for health or wealth preservation has never been more challenging. There's, of course, differences between how GenZ and boomers want to be served. And InsurTech do need to continue to be at the forefront of this change to connect both providers and new providers into the customer base. So I'm Alistair Nichol, and I'm a partner, as just described, at Evelyn Partners, where I lead our financial services practice across tax, advisory, transactions, and assurance. But more importantly, I'm delighted to be joined by an excellent panel, Taffy, Jo, Lisa, and Sarah, almost in that order. So brief introductions. Taffy Jo Myers is the Chief Commercial Officer at Neuron Digital Trading, part of Willis Towers Watson. She has tremendous experience across industry and practice building innovative and disruptive businesses. Lisa Wardlaw is the president and co-founder of 360 Digital Immersion, where she is focused on devising and implementing digital strategies, in particular helping InsurTech access the global market. And Sarah Kocianski is the CEO of FinTech Wales, an independent membership association and champion of the FinTech and financial services sectors in Wales, a country that she's very proud to say is home to some of the UK's most successful InsurTech companies. So, thank you very much, everyone. Before we get on to the transformative trajectories part of our talk, I thought we'd just start and do a very brief recap on how we got here over the last 10 or so years and the journey that InsurTech has been on. So maybe, Taffy Jo, if I could start with you on that one.
Absolutely, thank you. I think over the last 10 years, we've been really settled in on sort of proof of concept, testing and experimenting, as well as thinking about our foundational technologies and really getting sort of the inside of the house structured in such a way that it actually is meant for today's practices, but we haven't been looking forward to the future and what does the future really mean. So if we think about digitizing, right, as opposed to digitalizing, and I think those are two different things, right? So one is automating the process. That's where we really have been focused on automating the process as opposed to transforming the process, which I think we're looking at the next 10 years is really transformation.
So digitizing is the ones and noughts, and digitalizing is getting ready for the digital age, right?
Yes.
For the Luddite. Okay, great. And so Lisa, from your perspective.
We're going to make that a tongue twister. You're going to have to repeat that a couple of times
yeah.
to see if you know. I'm joking. So I clearly agree with what Taffy Jo said, and I guess maybe I would start back and just say, because I want to come back to the digitizing versus digitalizing and what we did, but let's step back and just say that we were trying to be, air quote, fast followers of the banking industry, honestly. And what we saw, I at the time was doing this little thing called Treasury and CFO World. And insurance, the first thing we did, very industrial revolution moniker, right? Like this thing digital came out. We're like, hey, let's go into self-serve. Let's get direct to consumer. Let's go digital. And to the point that Taffy Jo mentioned, where I don't think we're building our future today, we just automated what was. And I often say we were running on this treadmill and we're like, let's make the treadmill go a little bit faster. So my common example is let's go from 1.0 to 1.5. You know that thing called a facsimile? Let's maybe get rid of that, right? And so to your point, we weren't thinking about hey, we're not actually running on this route that the treadmill is over and over and over again repeating. And for me, that's what we've been doing the last 10 years. We've been hardcore doubling down on OpEx. How do we make operational improvements, which you've got to pay to play, so it actually makes sense in your strategic roadmap. But we haven't been thinking beyond the incrementalization or incremental improvement. So Taffy, I totally agree with you, and I don't know, Sarah, what you've seen, but I assume it's similar.
Yeah, I mean, I think to your point, I always think the digitize versus digitalize. We always had this example where I used to work years ago, but it was like digitize is when you got the Financial Times on your iPad and you swipe to turn the pages. Digitalize is Apple News. So that's kind of like the two ends of where you're starting and where you're going for. I think on the insurance and the InsurTech side, to sort of pick up on the point you made, where some really great strides have been made have been in distribution. But distribution is the low-hanging fruit of the insurance industry, right? Distribution is just the bit at the end. And to your point, it's where you touch a consumer or where you touch a business. And it's just the front end. And you can make the front end look pretty all you like. And there have been some serious advancements there when you think about how people can now submit claims, track claims, take photos on their phone, that front end piece, the distribution of selling insurance and then starting to come back up for the claims piece. We have done a lot of work there. I think if I'm going to talk about Wales and talk about the InsurTechs we have there, we have 3 of the 4 biggest comparison insurance websites in the UK located in Wales, and they were real game changers with how people in the United Kingdom bought insurance. It was digital. You could compare it all. You could rack it all up. You could look at the prices. You didn't need to go to a broker, and you could find something that was appropriate for you at probably a much lower price. So those were some great strides that have been made. But I totally agree that what we haven't touched yet is the really unsexy but really important back end of insurance, the really gnarly stuff. And I think that's kind of where we need to be looking at now. We need to stop picking off the low-hanging fruit, and we need to start looking at the stuff that's really going to shift that change, that's really going to throw us into 5th gear.
Yeah, so staying with you, Sarah, then, in terms of that look forward and how we make that transition, because we were talking in the green room around the old adage that insurance is sold, not bought, and transforming that perception. Yes, the intermediation part, the broking part has seen a bit of focus, but if we are going to transition from that into the operational side, how do you see that transformation happening? Is there anything that could be learned from other parts of the FinTech sector?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the issues, to your point about being a fast follower of banking, is that insurance does have a load of stuff that is literally still on paper. It is still in boxes in the basement of insurance companies. There are policies there that never mind digitalize. We haven't got around to digitizing yet. So there's some serious groundwork to be done there. I think, to your point, insurers need to shift the way they're thinking. And to be fair, some of the large ones are towards this mentality of prevention rather than cure, or kind of protection rather than kind of paying out when something goes wrong. Nobody likes speaking to their insurer under any circumstances. You never connect with an insurer, whether you're a business or an individual or whatever you are, let's have a great conversation. It's my house caught fire, my dog got hit by a car, something really, really awful has happened when you have to have that point of conversation. And I think when insurers start shifting the way that they view the product and services they offer to being a protection-minded product and service as opposed to something that's just reactionary, that's when they start to think through the full process that goes everything from kind of like what can we do on the front end to how do we actually make that happen? How do we take a step back? How do we look at the processes we have in place and ask why do these processes look like this? And if it's just because, well, they always have, that's not the correct answer. And you have to unpick those processes before you can start looking at technology, before you can start looking at suppliers. And don't even get me started on insurers insisting they can use AI, because until you get those paper boxes out of the basement, you ain't using AI properly.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
can I just pick up on that?
Yeah,
So I would say I do think, I agree with what you said on some of the personal lines from the distribution. I would say on the commercial and specialty insurance side, the distribution has not yet been adequately addressed. And I would also say, again, to the point of sort of that process efficiency. A lot of work is being done on the process efficiency because quite frankly, the brokers and the underwriters who are the professionals and who are sort of that, the standard for helping the insureds understand the risk and protect themselves from it, have been trapped by the mundane and a lot of things that are sort of time consumptive. And so part of this move is to get them, relieved of that mundane trapping of the processes and sort of the antiquated and quite frankly, friction-filled day-to-day of being in the business, which doesn't allow you those deep insights that move you to the sort of the protect and prevent, as opposed to the sort of the insure and restore or the cure. And where we are seeing it now, sort of to say, we are seeing that the insureds, quite frankly, they are facing a velocity of risk that is changing, an amount of uncertainty around their business, right? The complexity of the world that we live in, right? And then this great ambiguity of what does my policy cover and what does it not, even with a professional risk manager. And so unlocking that ability to look in and get the insights has never been more critical for the sustainment of what we do, which is, quite frankly, provide the backbone of society and the economy.
And do you think one of the challenges, I think, around the insurance sector across the globe has been talent retention, getting the right fresh blood into the sector? Do you think InsurTechs have a sort of incubator role around careers that attracts that new generation as well? Do you think there's a role to play there?
I think it helps to prove that insurance is sexy, because it's often think of this stodgy sort of industry that somebody's doing it somewhere, but it's not necessarily a great place for creative thinkers to go. So really moving into this idea of data science and how you use the data to solve problems and put the pieces together. And I know Lisa has a view on data and how data is, and so we should talk about that, right? How data actually can be brought to the center of what we do is what we need to attract new talent. We also have an obligation to teach the old folks like myself how to use the data more appropriately for decisioning and actioning. Yeah. But Lisa,
I mean, there's so many good threads here to pull. I think, first of all, I guess I would like to thread all the way back to the back end, because I came from the back end. So I started at the CFO side.
Then I mean to offend you by not calling it.
No. We've over-indexed on the back end. So let me kind of go all the way back, and this ties to talent. We spent so much time trying to automate what was. The problem that we have, and this is actually the problem that we have with bringing new talent in, is we're not allowing people to think about what should and could be. We're saying, and I used to hire all these amazing, talented people in different tech hubs. I built tech hubs for some of the largest reinsurers in the world. And they'd come in, they're like, well, this is really, really boring. And it's not the industry, by the way. They're like, the problems that we're solving are really cool. But you're asking me to make something 1% better.
And that's not going to stimulate a creative mind.
No. And so what I started doing generically is I started saying, you know what? Don't make my operations 1% better. Make my balance sheet 1% better. Let's go. And so, side note, when you make my old balance sheet at Munich Re 1% better in North America, that's $1 billion. Yeah. That's really cool. So to your point, and then we had to get there on data, Taffy Joe, right? So because all these things are circular. And so I guess the overarching theme that I see is we are still focused on running the race we always ran. Our business model is, of course, economic stability and honoring an intangible promise with an entire multi-trillion-dollar industry to back up a promise, right? So that doesn't fundamentally change. The products, to your point, the products we innovate on, how we innovate on those requires that we get out of the race that we ran prior and we run a new race. Circular economy, data. I've even gotten into we can't use common data solutions to solve for industries. So I've gotten into this HTAP concept, which for those of you who don't know, it's hybrid transaction analytical processing, and talk about getting some people's attention. That's Web 2, Web 3. And I'm not saying it because we're going crypto. But what I'm saying is we can actually secure data in new ways that you can get the top talent. They're I was talking to some Web 3 people a couple weeks ago here at a conference. They're like, wait, you're doing that in insurance? So sorry, I think that what we need to do as leaders in this industry, so if you're still here and you're listening to this, thank you for being here. We need to step up and say, not only is our industry cool, it's the foundation of economic stability. We are the bedrock. And by the way, we can solve problems in new ways. We want people to come into our industry. We got to be inclusive, not make them feel like they're an outsider or that they're not cool enough, because we're really good at turning people away. So I think those are really important. I don't know what you all think about that.
I think just to your last piece, I've seen so many innovation attempts from large organizations fail because they take the innovative people and they stick them in another room or another building and they give them some Lego to play with. And again, that's not I mean, you build tech hubs, but it still happens like that. People still do that, large financial services organizations, and it's like you're wasting everybody's time by taking that approach.
Well, and I think that's the future is really about collaboration, right? So you really talk about as we co-design, we co-create, we co-deploy, but also taking practitioners into the innovation, but bringing the technologist into the innovation, bringing outsiders in, right? And it really becomes a new design. To your point, we're not, and someone said earlier, we're not just automating all the things that happened in the 17 and 1800s. We're actually saying, what would we do if we were starting from scratch? How would this look different so that it's not your, as we say in the South, this ain't your grandpa's way of doing things. So ultimately really thinking about if we're going to remain the ones that fuel innovation in our world, we have to disrupt ourselves. We also have to be respectful about the sort of the fundamental truths about insurance, recognizing that we are exclusionary on purpose. That doesn't mean that we widen the protection gap or that we maintain this exclusionary sort of an environment or demographic in terms of who we let in, right? We need to be reflecting the economies, the communities, and the businesses that we serve. And we need to do business the way they want to do business. And right now, we're not. We actually stop momentum of scale up and startup businesses because we take them backwards. We need to be able to bring them forwards. And the work that we are doing with digital distribution is really trying to say, look, if insurance started in London, right, this is the insurance marketplace, it's the epicenter of the universe for insurance. How do we take that physical market and then bring it into a digital and digitized world, respectful of what exists and taking it and moving it forward for what doesn't yet exist and needs to exist for the perpetuation of the industry, but also the economy and society?
Yeah, I think I totally agree. I think that question of insurance and exclusionary is probably an entire separate session on how technology could probably.
I've done day-long workshops with the FCA on that. So that's
so probably not going to cover that in 3 minutes. But just sticking with collaboration, because it was interesting. Obviously, it's been covered a lot over the last couple of days. But in the idea of we focused mostly on the InsurTechs themselves just now, but we have referred to some of the innovation labs, and I agree. You get some great people, you tell them you're now innovative, and put them in a room. It's not necessarily setting them up for success. But what are your views briefly on co-collaboration with the providers? So the InsurTech collaborating with the providers, the traditional ones, and any other opportunities for collaboration around the market. Just briefly before we wrap up.
Well, I've got an example I can give you from the Welsh market, which is Admiral. So the British people in the room will know Admiral. You guys will know Admiral, you know the insurance, but huge insurer based out of Cardiff. And they have Admiral Pioneer, which is basically a corporate venture / kind of incubator system, and they bring startups into Admiral, and they work with them. They invest in them, but they also bring them in. They share an office space, and they all kind of work together. And we have one of our members, Wagon X. They were on stage earlier, and they've kind of only succeeded because they were able to go in and work with Admiral and find out kind of how things are working, and they've got support from them and access to these huge people who will end up being their customers. But you kind of need that circle, that virtuous circle. And I think obviously it works really well for the startups because they get money if they need the money, but also they get access to people and knowledge and experience firsthand that can help them accelerate their growth. And I think for the insurers, insurers bleed talent, to your point, because they get people in, they train them up, they come up with it, they go, oh my God, that's a problem. I know how to solve that problem, and they cannot get their employer, whether it's a reinsurer or a retail insurer or a business insurer, whoever it is, to commit to helping them do that. So they leave and they start an InsurTech. So the big insurer bleeds talents. The InsurTechs kind of are left on their own without the support of the big company, and it makes a lot more sense for them to work together, albeit it's very difficult for large organizations to work with very small organizations, and it would be wrong of me not to point that out, that it is still a huge cultural divide that generally has to be worked on consistently.
Well, as an InsurTech that is fully funded by an old guard, sort of one of the top 3, right, insurance brokers in the world, I can say there's a benefit to that. There's also some constraints to that. I think what we have to be is really it is a culture shift, right? We have to shift the hearts and minds of where the financing is coming from. We also have to shift our hearts and minds and think about, we're no longer thinking about pure competition. When one gets better, we all get better. It sort of drives it. So we have to co-collaborate with the competition. And there's a term that's being bounced about, and I never say it correctly, but it's really where collaboration and competition comes together. Competition, right? So whether it's the InsurTechs collaborating, the reinsurers collaborating, the brokers collaborating, the carriers collaborating, it's really bringing it together. So, and I'll steal another word that I actually heard or give credit to Lord Holmes is, right, if we want to move this forward, right, and he was talking about sort of the unicornification of the London market in FinTech, if we want to do this going forward with insurance, right, if we have to sort of think about how do we do this unicornification of the insurance industry, and that is all about transformation. It is all about the digitalization and not just the digitization.
Yeah, okay, makes sense. So coption is one that I didn't quite possibly get quite awkwardly wrong, I think.
Thank you for helping me with that. We'll practice that later.
Yeah, good. Yeah. So thank you, everyone. Yes, I think we're pretty much at time. So I just wanted to first of all thank my panelists again for a great discussion, and I hope for those of you in the audience, giving you a bit of a sense of call to action around it. It's not just incremental. There's an opportunity for real radical change in the InsurTech sector in particular, and there's real good that we can do. And we've got the power to do it. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.